My name is Charles Cullen. They call me the philosopher killer. Some call me insane. But Aristotle said that no genius has ever existed without a touch of madness. Some say I am evil. But I say I make my victims face the consequences of their own ideas. What about you? Could you defend your beliefs if your life depended on it?
Cruel Logic, The Philosopher Killer. A brilliant theological thriller novel by Brian James Godawa. Readers are saying the most thrilling novel you will read this year. A page-turner with shocking twists. Get it now at Amazon.com in Kindle paperback and audiobook.
What's happening? What's up? Hold out your glass because we're about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Justin. You may know me from my works with the Dig Bible podcast. This is my solo project, or the Prometheus Lens we use as an allegory to take a second look at everything. Well, today, you might as well call this Doomsday or Prep Day. I'm sure you guys have seen the movie Saw. Imagine if you put yourself in a situation where you're kidnapped and forced to defend your faith or die. Could you do that? Well, today I have a great guest with you. I have a filmmaker, an author and researcher, podcaster extraordinaire, Brian Godawa. Brian, how you doing, bud?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on, Justin. Excited to talk about this.
I know we talked to you a few weeks back on the Dig Bible podcast, and
Yeah.
I'd seen you talk about this book on Facebook, but I hadn't really got the gist of the book till we talked to you, and I was immediately intrigued. And I was like, man, this is a really just awesome concept. And the name of your book is called Cruel Logic. Now, before we get too deep into it, this idea, I mean, this is a pretty, wild concept for a book. How did you come up with this storyline?
Yeah, well, as I like to say, the log line or the premise of the story, it's a brilliant serial killer captures university professors and he debates them. And the topic of his debate is his moral right to kill them. And that's sort of the hook of the whole story, as you already mentioned. But there's also, I go into the woke university and what that's like in modern day America. But the idea actually came many, many years ago. Although I did see Saw when it first came out and I did enjoy it. I had already seen a movie. I had a couple ideas long before that. One was the original idea came from an old Christian apologist from back in the 60s. His name was Walter Martin. And I used to listen to him, more like in the 80s or 90s. And I would listen to his old tapes, of his, lectures and of his radio shows. They didn't have podcasts back then, right? So he's on this radio show his name was Walter Martin, and he was on this radio show called Long John Nebel Show. And he's an apologist. I really like him because he's rascally. He was an older guy, but he had a good sense of humor, but he also had a good way with being frank and honest with unbelievers. So he was describing how he had his experience debating with an atheist, and he typified a lot of atheists where he was saying, atheists don't really, they think they have beliefs, but they don't think about their thinking. They don't really think about the consequences of what they're saying and what they're thinking, and he was debating with about morality to an atheist, right? And this atheist was saying, well, I'm an atheist, but I have a morality. He's saying, no, you can't, there's no such thing as morality without a God. And he's like, no, I do have morality. And I believe morality. What are you talking about? And Walter got so frustrated because he wasn't thinking, he was trying to tell him, yeah, look, yeah, you have morality, but it doesn't comport with your atheism. That's the point. If everything you say about atheism is true, it doesn't make sense to believe in morality, right? And so he said, okay, he got all frustrated. He goes, okay, it's 1940s Germany. I'm a commandant Nazi, Nazi camp guard with a gun pointed at you, and you're a Jew. Give me one reason why I shouldn't shoot you. And I never forgot that, of course. It was, and I think it was so powerful to me because it really is the heart and essence of the story of my novel, Cruel Logic, but also it really is the big, the smoking gun, shall we say, for when you're debating with atheists or unbelievers in particular. The point is that if you believe that reality is, the universe is created by chance, there's no intelligent design behind anything, life is reducible to random evolution, right? Then, and that morality is a social construct. There's no real absolute transcendent God to define what's right and wrong. If that's what you believe, then you have no basis to believe in anything being right and wrong at all. And so that haunted me for many years. And of course, I've talked about that in my own, discussions with unbelievers. I've used that as a good example. But there's also a couple movies in later years that sort of inspired me, that made me think, hey, I can make this into a movie. And that was the movie Seven, which was, the infamous movie with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, and the killer was played by what's his name? Forgot his name. But anyway, great movie, and it really had this moral dimension to it. But it was still done by atheists, and they didn't quite understand the fullness of what they were arguing. And there was another movie that came out. There was a vampire movie called The Addiction. And that was like that. That's what hit home for me, what this story could be. And The Addiction was a black and white movie, and it was an art house film. So it's not very mainstream. Hardly anybody has seen the movie, but I just love it. And it's a black and white movie about vampires. And it's the story of this NYU philosophy student who gets bitten by a vampire, and she turns into a vampire. And they show the progression of her turning into it, and then her feeding on fellow students and professors. And it's interesting because the vampires in the movie would actually philosophize with the people before they bit them, right, and killed them. And they were talking about this very thing about, well, you philosophize, Feuerbach said that we are nothing but stardust, so what are you worried about? That kind of thing. So it really hit home to me that this could be a movie, And so I set about years ago, I wrote Cruel Logic as a screenplay, actually, and it won lots of awards in secular screenplay contests and such. And I tried to get it made as a movie over the years, but I just couldn't get it made. I had some close calls, and that's not uncommon. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea or a bad story or script. It sometimes it's almost impossible to get a movie made. So sometimes it just happens even with the best of them. So back to the story then. So, I tried to get it made as a movie, couldn't. And I got to the point where I made a short movie of one of the scenes from the movie itself as a means of trying to pitch the idea to Hollywood producers and such. And I made it. And in fact, it's on my website. You can actually go watch it still. In fact, I got Tony Hale to play the victim. And I got another great actor to play the serial killer. And anyway, so that, it just languished for a long time. And I started writing novels years ago. And I finally got to the point where I realized, what? It's time to translate this screenplay into a novel. I've been wanting to for the longest time. And now's the time to do it. And at the time, I kind of focused, the screenplay originally had focused mostly on, you have to remember, this was written long before a lot of this woke theology that is basically going on all the campuses, right? It had been going on for decades, of course, but before we knew about it. I had written that script before we knew about it. And so now that all of it had come to light and come out, whether it's, the trans ideology, diversity, equity, and inclusion being taught, being dominating as a philosophy in higher education. All that stuff had come out since then, and I realized that this concept of this serial killer as he's a philosophy teacher in a college, it still works, but it's now in a much more, I think, richer environment of ideas that are connected, shall we say, to the very problem that we're addressing, and that is the wokeness in the modern universities. And so I wrote the story. I wrote the novel. And by the way, the subtitle is called "The Philosopher Killer." So it's called "Cruel Logic: The Philosopher Killer." And anyway, I wrote the novel and just released it a couple months ago, and it's doing really well, it's selling really well. But the heart and soul of it was, well, let's put it this way: there's several themes in the novel, and what's going on. And number one, I wanted to write a entertaining thriller, kind of like Silence of the Lambs or Seven, right? So that's my ultimate goal. But I also love philosophy. And I know most people don't care for it, but I wanted to make philosophy entertaining, And I thought, well, if I put it in the context of this a serial killer story, it might gain some interest from people. And sure enough, it has worked. Even though you've got philosophical debates going on in the story, people have been loving it. And it's been, I don't write them at an academic level. I try to write them in a level that can be understood, even if you don't know the world of academia and higher education or philosophy. You could still follow along and get it. But so I wanted to bring in this whole wokeness, and I wanted to show it accurately. So this isn't a novel that whatever tries to demonize the modern university. I want to show it like it really is. In fact, all the incidents that I have that occur, whether it's Antifa protests or making an occupation zone in the school, or trans ideology going on, or the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that's controls the university. Everything I write in my novel is based on actual events that have occurred within the last 10 years or so. Even so much so that my main character is a psychologist, and he's trying to track down this killer, but at the same time, he's kind of like a Jordan Peterson character, right? He's actually at the university, he's helping the cops to track this killer, but at the same time, he's being attacked by the university administration and the students because he's trying to get Western civilization courses back into the school. And of course, that's a no-no with the modern woke university. They hate Western civilization. And their hatred for Western civilization is one of those big picture issues. You know what I mean? Like this is a big idea, because for them to want to get rid of Western civilization in the curriculum really is an expression of what their real goal is to end Western civilization. They think Western civilization is evil.
Now expand
and
upon
course,
that, Brian, for those that are not familiar with that term.
Sure. And of course, Western civilization is founded on Judeo-Christian morality and worldview, as well as some of the Enlightenment rationalism from the past as well. Sort of a mixture of good and bad, in my opinion. But it's certainly the Western civilization as we have it in America is founded on that Judeo-Christian foundation. And what that means is we organize our society around certain ultimate principles, moral principles. You could say the three main things: knowledge, being, and morality or ethics. And those are three philosophical concepts around which societies organize themselves. So, in other words, what is the nature of being? What is human nature? What are we like? Are we primarily good people, or are we primarily bad people? Like human nature. Are we essentially evil or essentially good? That whole debate, right? But also, what is the nature of reality? Is reality something we can see, feel, and touch, or is it a product of the mind? How do these factors work together? And then also, what is knowledge? That is, as we see now in today's world, claims of knowledge are just dichotomously opposite, right? People have different facts. Then you can't even agree on the facts anymore, right? So what do you
It's
call knowledge?
perception.
Yeah, and it's subjective, So knowledge could be considered justified true belief. It's what you believe, but is true, but also you've got to be able to justify. You can't just say anything, which is what modern day postmodernists say, right? It's like, I am whatever I think I am in my head. I'm a woman, or I'm a dolphin, whatever.
And
Well,
you
and
must
there have been,
participate in the delusion.
and you must participate in the delusion. Exactly. And then, of course, lastly, ethics, which is, what is the moral structure that all of our human relations are founded on? So all these components of society that we have in America are rooted basically in a Judeo-Christian construct. And the modern university is become postmodern and leftist and Marxist, and it critical theory, we've heard these phrases, critical race theory, but also critical theory in general, which is this postmodern attempt to undermine all our notions of reality, truth, and morality. And so that's why you hear people saying, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, right? We've always had people who believe in relativism. Relative truth is relative, morality is relative, right? But the specific notion of postmodernity, which dominates a lot of the thinking, is that truth is not knowable, and therefore everything in society is reducible to power. The organizing principle of the postmodern mind, of the critical theory mind, of the woke mind is power relations. Everything is reducible to power relations. Therefore, all our claims to reality, all our claims to morality, these are only things that we use to justify our own hold on power. That's why they get all these white supremacy, and everything is systemically intended to maintain whites' power. That's how they are. That's their religion of how they're
Or
interpreting
men to
reality and
dominate the
truth.
society.
Exactly.
But there has to be absolute universal truths, because these are the same people that get upset when you call them by the wrong name or do certain things that offend them. And it's like, there has to be universal truths. Every nation in the world, no matter their religion, knows it's wrong to kill, and steal these things. These are universal truths.
Yes, but technically, every you say everyone believes it's wrong to kill, but that's actually not true, because everybody has a justification for killing certain people they don't want alive, right? So, whether it's, white supremacists or Nazis, or Palestinians who believe it's okay to kill Jews because they're nothing but rats, just like Nazis do, or whether it's the left contingents who believe that, like I said, Judeo-Christianity is actually evil and they must eliminate it. And we see more and more of this rhetoric now, right? We see more violent rhetoric in our society that that they want to get rid of people they disagree with morally and ethically. This is the woke contingent. So, they say, decolonization, and decolonization. See, we're colonizers and colonizing is evil. Therefore, that justifies terrorism and violence against who they call colonizers. So pulling back to what I was saying earlier, though, if everything's reducible to power, then everything you say and believe is just your attempt to claim to keep power over other people. And therefore, the world is reducible to two kinds of people, the oppressed and the oppressor. And this is where it's got Marxist background. It's very Marxist in its origins, but Marxism tended to stress economics. The woke worldview of critical theory extends that to everything, to race, gender, and class, and religion and such. So But the basic, as we all now see, right, the basic concept of oppressor and oppressed is the oppressor is white heterosexual Christian males, and the oppressed are everybody else: women, people of color, trans people, homosexuals, etc. These are all the oppressed. And the rhetoric that we're hearing from the university now is becoming very violent against the oppressor and even justifying it because, hey, if we've been oppressed like slaves, then it's just for us to rise up and kill. People
Kill
are
the
using that
masters.
justification for the Palestinians to attack the Israelites.
And that
the
blows
Israels.
my mind. I never thought I'd ever see that
Yeah.
justification, of the invasion and murder of another country or people.
Yeah.
In America.
I mean, you expect it from some people, but you're hearing it from students, from news people, from university professors, and the like, the intelligentsia. It truly is sickening. So all this morass of stuff that we're talking about here, I wanted to depict what's that like in the university, because it originates in the university. But of course, that could be very boring if you're just trying to just show all these things. So I tell the journey of actually an evangelical Christian who comes to the school as a freshman, and he's naive, and he gets sucked up into it out of his concern for compassion. He's manipulated into the wokeness, and it shows him his journey, which leads him to the point of making some life or death decisions in the story that become very, very, very serious indeed. But I wanted to deal with how Christians are often not equipped to deal with this because of the simplicity of what we're being taught, the ignorance and naivete of much of evangelicalism. It's in terms of not being taught really how to address unbelief, atheism, skepticism, etc., in a very efficient way. And so they go to college and they lose their faith. What's the phrase we've heard lately all over the place? Christian deconstruction or Christian deconversion. And now, of course, it's always been the case that many religious people have gone to college and lost their faith forever, right? But in these more recent days, there's sort of that redefinition of the term. And also we see a lot more of this because of podcasts, where people are having their podcasts describing their journey and how they've lost their faith through these things, right? And I find, they're all very much similar. They all kind of have the same sort of components. And it comes down to a real weak Christian understanding of their Christian faith, basically. Cliches and slogans that when they get really challenged with intelligent arguments, they fall down and they get sucked up into it. So I wanted to address that as well. But in the bigger picture issue too, it's like, if in the same way that this serial killer is capturing these university professors and he's making arguments with them, what's the point? Well, he's actually got a couple reasons why he's doing that. I'm not going to tell you everything because I don't want to give away the novel, but there's a cop and the psychiatrist who are tracking him down, and there's a cat and mouse game with them that he's also playing. But in the same way that these godless, unbelieving ideas lead to consequences, in that same way, so the idea of what do you get when you get rid of Western civilization along with its Judeo-Christian roots, right? And so in a very real sense, the two things are very tied together, right? We see the very rejection of the foundations of all morality and truth in our universities, in the youth. The youth grow up and they go out and get jobs, and now they're in HR departments, in corporations, in schools, in churches, everywhere, right? And they all believe this critical theory nonsense, and they all believe this wokeness. And that's why we see all our major institutions have been captured by this woke DEI mentality: diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is, of course, is a misnomer, because it really should be DIE, die, right? Because what it proclaims is the opposite of what it is. That's how the left always operates. But anyway, so what happens when you teach people that there is no truth, there is no morality, but power? Well, they're going to act on power. And that's exactly what modern day students have become as they've gone out and captured our major institutions, grown up, shall we say. So that's sort of the big picture, world of ideas that I'm trafficking in. But as I say, I seek to make it an entertaining story and novel as well. So with some romance and such in there. So it's it it it's a perfect connection of my two loves, multiple loves. I love storytelling and movies and novels, but I also love apologetics. And this is a way to embody that argument that I told you about earlier. It's called the moral argument for the existence of God, namely that without God, you can't have anything morally right or wrong. And are you willing to, as an atheist or an unbeliever, are you willing to face that reality? What does that mean? That means all your claims of morality, like you had just said, Justin, all your outrage is irrelevant. It's just your personal sentiments that have nothing to do with right or wrong, because there are many people who disagree with you. And so, those are the kind of things that, okay, but so much of apologetics is this rational argumentation, which is a good thing and it has its place, of course. But I wanted to incarnate this moral argument for the existence of God into a narrative in a way that will touch people on their human, their emotional level, their rational level as well, but their emotional and their human level. Yeah, it's just. So that's what I hope it does, and so far I've been getting a lot of great responses that it's doing that. I wasn't sure if people would appreciate it, but they really are. They're catching on, and it's something that's really hasn't been done by anyone else quite like this before.
If you guys are still with us, you must be intrigued. I have a video that Brian has sent us. I'm going to insert that here and let this play through for a break, and a quick word from our sponsors.
My name is Charles Cullen. They call me the philosopher killer. They say I'm evil, but I say I make my victims face the consequences of their own ideas. What about you? Could you defend your beliefs if your life depended on it?
Cruel Logic, The Philosopher Killer, a brilliant theological thriller novel by Brian James Godawa. Get it now at Amazon.com in Kindle paperback and audiobook.
Guys, what's up? Tom Dunn here from Through the Black. We have launched our new ministry outreach, No More Dead Babies. And the website is nomoredeadbabies.com. We want you to go to that website and get a free t-shirt, okay? We want you to join the movement, okay? We need soldiers to step up and say that they're going to be a voice for the voiceless, okay? Guys, we've never done anything like this before. This is a big deal, and I don't know who all is ready for it out there, but it's time to step up, okay? And we're asking you to go to the website and order the shirt. The shirt is free, but you got to pay for shipping, okay? We're going to ship it out to you as soon as we get it. You tell us what size you need, and then we're going to send you the t-shirt, okay? Join us. The goal is to get thousands of these shirts. I keep pushing this. I think this boldness can be contagious.
My name's Nick. I'm the owner of Kevlar Joe's, and I'm the roaster. I'm an Air Force Security Forces veteran, a dad to 3 wild boys, and a husband to my wife, Crystal, and a coffee enthusiast. From a family in a small town in Missouri, we started with the simple idea of crafting a perfectly bold cup of coffee. Inspired by wellness and countless pots of stale coffee while deployed, we wanted to craft a bold, clean, and smooth coffee. So we did, and we realized we wanted to share this coffee with our friends. Lord knows we could all use a good cup of coffee right about now. From the farm to your coffee cup, there's nothing like a good, well-crafted, and bold cup of coffee. No matter what time of the day, it's there to pick you up, motivate you, and relax you. We hope you enjoy our coffee. Be bold, be humble, be Kevlar. And you can find Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company anytime you want at www.kevlarjoe.com. Enjoy.
Now we're back, and Brian, this is, like I said, I was already intrigued But now I'm not a big fiction reader, but I'm going to get this book now because I really am. I want to check this thing out, and especially that trailer. That trailer we just saw, man, that thing was riveting. The
Yeah, that
guy
was
just
fun. I gotta.
Yeah, that guy just looking at the camera, and his glasses were cracked, splattered in blood, and man, I was just like,
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah, I got a great filmmaker out in South Africa actually to shoot that for me. But it was it was a good quick way to sort of capture the vibe of what I'm trying to do, And like I said, a lot of people love a good thriller with a good serial killer or murderer, But this is, of course, I call the series theological thriller novels, meaning they're thriller novels, but they're more than thriller novels. They make you think about human nature, the problem of evil, and the existence of God. And the first one is Cruel Logic, and there's going to be a couple other novels. They're not going to be sequential; they're going to be all standalone novels, but they're going to be kind of similar in the kind of thing that they're doing and addressing with those stories. But Cruel Logic, the philosopher killer, is the first, and it really was. It was quite a challenge because I had to do a lot of studying and a lot of reading, and in fact, I've put some footnotes in the book, and the reason why I did that, I explained it in the novel. You don't want to usually do footnotes in a novel, you don't. But so much of the stuff that I was telling the stories of was based on real events, and I wanted people to realize this isn't made up. If you want to see where this was, here's the newspaper articles or the news. Boy, the old language, huh? Here's the news posts that that talk about this event or these kinds of things that I'm talking about, as well as the quotes. I have a lot of teachers. I have like philosophy professor. I have a trans activist. I have feminists. I have an evolutionary biologist, and all of them. Some of them will actually quote from actual famous unbelieving skeptics like Carl Sagan or who are these new atheist guys like Richard Dawkins and those guys, I'll actually, who?
Young, Carl Jung and all
Oh
them
yeah.
guys,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, they ain't too new, but
yeah. The psychologist actually quotes from Jung. Absolutely. And the professors, so I wanted to be accurate and also reflect the real ideas that are out there, not just my own. So I sometimes footnoted so that people know I'm not plagiarizing. I wanted to. Sometimes the way these authors will say things are just, like Richard Dawkins has that famous quote where he says something like, that Old Testament God is a genocidal, misogynistic, mass murdering, egotistical, it's this rant that's everyone has quoted it in all over the place. Right. And so I have my professor say those words, right, because I want to address those very real ideas that people are actually believing. But this isn't.
And if you're not a fiction reader, too, I want to say this and give you some props. I have read your other two books. And forgive me on the titles; it's been a while. But when the giants ruled the earth.
When giants were upon the earth,
and then that other one. But
when Watchers ruled the nations.
Yes. And both of those, because he has the series, the Chronicles of the Nephilim. And in those series, he tells biblical stories and stuff, but he once again, he entertains you, tells you a story, but there's truths and stuff, actual events from the Bible and history, Easter egged in there and weaved into that storyline. So what he done is he took all those books and combined all of the themes and the storylines and the ideas,
research.
all that into these books, and those were really good. I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, and Cruel Logic is a departure from what you're talking about is my Chronicles of the Nephilim, Chronicles of the Watchers, and Chronicles of the Apocalypse. So all these novels, biblical stories retold with a supernatural angle in it, angels and demons and all that, and spiritual warfare, that kind of stuff. And Cruel Logic is a definite different genre. I don't. It's more of the classic thriller genre. I don't have angels and demons in it, so people have to understand that it's a very different sort of story than my previous ones. But yeah, I do love to provide the research for people. That's part of the thing about it is, I knew that my Christian readers reading my Bible novels would go, "Where did he get this stuff?" Because some of it was pretty wild.
Where's
But
the references?
Yeah, exactly. And that's fine. I'm kind of like that too. So I thought, you know what? I was inspired by Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton would write his, fictional, wild sci-fi stories, but then he would always have an appendix at the end of the novel where he would share some of the real research that the fiction was founded on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure other people will want that with mine. So I did that with all my Bible novels. At the end of each one, I have an appendix, or now a book that you can buy that tells all the research behind the fictional story you're reading. And so that's why I kind of had the same impulse with Cruel Logic to just at least footnote it a little bit, but not too much, not where it would get in the way of you reading the actual novel. But yeah, I do tend to like to verify with research and scholarship. But of course, Cruel Logic, it's actually, in a way, the scholarship is within the story, because you've got these professors, they're actually quoting and saying these statements from what you actually will hear in the college classes that you go to. It's quite accurate about what goes on in college. And some of it's shocking to people I've had people write me and go, "I didn't know this was going on." I'm thinking, you didn't? Like there are things like Sex Week, and by the way, this was started by Yale. All right. Ivy League Yale, not some podunk out of the way college, like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. Yale started Sex Week, where they have all these free seminars and lectures on everything from, kinky sex to BDSM to, trans sex and all this kind of stuff. And now it's become a very common thing amongst a lot of college campuses, where this is where you get a lot of weird, freaky things. Like they'll have porn stars coming in and teaching a class on things that's, it's pretty grotesque actually. And of course there's they push the bounds any way that's possible. And I talk about that in my story, and everything that occurs in the Sex Week in my story was based on the real stuff that goes on at Yale and other schools. So it's that real. When you read this stuff, you get the sense of, wow, if it's really like this, then we're in deep trouble. And it is really like that.
And
So
that's the scary part, is how people are so clueless, because I love how you said these are the future generations. These kids coming out of college are going to be the ones that have the good education and go into take an entry level position, but then they're going to move up and be the bosses and the executives of these companies, doing the hiring, the firing, and the product manufacturing to your grandchildren. I mean, and it's just, the ball rolls downhill, so to speak. And my dad used to say something, and he was just a good old boy, 9-to-5 factory worker. He wasn't no college educated guy, but he talked about this stuff back in the 90s when I was a kid. And he was like, it all started in the 60s, son. He said, everybody was, he said, smoking dope. He said, and taking acid. He said, and free love everywhere. He said, and Christians, he said, and us people, he said, at work every day didn't have time to fool with that nonsense. He said, we just kind of turned a blind eye. He said, and those weeds grew. He said, and those kids that were smoking dope, taking acid, he said, ended up going to college and being your college professors. He said, now, here they are. He said, those same people that was smoking the dope, taking the acid and all the free love are the ones teaching your kids and indoctrinating them. And
exactly. And then you have Christian parents or just regular parents sending their kids to schools, these colleges, and they come back hating their parents, calling them racists. And they're like, what's going on? And I'll tell you, the ignorance is really shown by this latest incident with all these mass protests in college campuses around the country, pro-Palestinian genocidal protests against Israel, calling for genocide against Israel. And now finally some Jews and other, what do they call them? graduates from those colleges that would give millions of dollars to their alma mater, right? There's this long-standing problem of what's the word I'm thinking of?
Alumni?
For graduates. Alumni, thank you. Duh. So all these alumni give all these millions of dollars to their alma mater, and only now they're getting mad and they go, "Hey, wait a minute, what are you doing here?" And I'm going to withhold my money. It's like, you should have withheld that years ago, because they were teaching this woke evil to your kids, and you still didn't know it until they finally come out protesting for genocide. Then you realize maybe that's what if that's what it takes. Hey, I'm grateful for it, but that's a good expression of how far behind so many people are, that they don't realize they've been paying these universities billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars of giving and such, as well as donations, as well as tax money from the government, to these institutions to teach your kids to hate Jews, to hate you, to think everything's racist, and become violent. And so this is what's happening, and this is what is the culmination of it is occurring now, and people are starting to wake up a little bit. And I don't know, I hope they follow through and really truly cut the spigot of money off to these universities, because they really need to be cut off. I wouldn't send my kid to any college. Maybe a special Christian college. There's a few in the country that are worthy. Hillsdale, John Patrick Henry College, but not very many. But I can only confirm this, that I am a Christian and I have a Christian worldview in everything that I tell. So I could argue with anybody to prove that it's biblical, what my story. So whatever occurs in there, but I will say this: what occurs is not what you would expect in novels written by Christians. This is not a Christian novel in that sense, right? In other words, things in life don't always work out. Christians don't always win in life, right? And so, and particularly if you don't obey the Lord, what are the consequences, right? But also, we've been talking about all this evil, and one of the evils is, now I don't describe. It's not gruesome. It's not gruesome in details. The scenes of the murder aren't actually. I don't actually go through them. I only have the debates and the aftermath, right? You
don't go saw on everybody.
Yeah. We don't actually see the events occurring, but it's still pretty brutal. I mean, it's still a pretty hard thing to take for people. But there's also, in order to show evil accurately, and in order to show this evil that I was talking about, this is an evil that is deep within the souls of modern day students in universities. They've been fed violent evil into their minds to see the world as the oppressor, to see the goodness of the world, America, white people, Christians. These are all things that they're taught to be evil and taught to hate. And that hatred leads to violence. And so I want to accurately portray the evil so you can understand it. And so there's F-bombs in there. There's some bad language, not a lot of it, but enough to make the point that the violent evil that people do comes from a violent evil heart. And it's expressed first in their language, right? The way kids talk these days, and if you've seen any of these protests, they're full of vile, violent.
Yeah, wearing vagina hats and everything else. I mean,
yeah. So I want to accurately capture that, because if I just have students that are just saying, "Hey, gosh darn it," or "You dummies," it's not realistic at all. It's not depicting the evil that is in their hearts. Mm-hmm. So be ready. There's some language in it if you're a person who is sensitive to that kind of thing. But I try to pull back on it. It's not like a Quentin Tarantino movie, okay? but it's definitely realistic in that sense. Because my argument is, if you do not accurately depict the evil in this world, then the redemption that you are offering has no power, right? People are going to watch it, and if they think, well, he's not accurately capturing anything that requires redemption, or he's not accurately depicting evil, then they're not going to believe you or trust your picture of redemption. And this story does have redemption, but it comes at the price up through a lot of pain and suffering and evil, just like in the Bible. And I think that's the world we live in today.
And that's a biblical theme too. Study to show thyself approved, and be ready to give an answer for the faith that you have.
Yeah, I think that's 1 Peter 3:15. It's the classic Christian apologist verse, and it's wonderful because it really does express where we should be even as Christians. That is, we should be equipped. We should be ready to defend our beliefs. And so many Christians sadly are not. They just, they get, and then when they get exposed to someone like Bart Ehrman, he's an apostate who's written some very popular books. He is a Bible scholar, a New Testament Bible scholar, and he still is, but he's an apostate, and he tries to persuade people that the Bible is not God's word and it's just a confusing mess, and that God's not real. And he does a good job because there are a lot of problems with the biblical text as we have it. And anyone who knows textual criticism knows about this, but most normal Christians don't. And when they get exposed to it for the first time or whatever through the Bart Ehrman, I know of people who've lost their faith by reading Bart Ehrman because they were not equipped, or they had a really sort of shallow belief in the Bible as God's word, and it has to be all perfect, and it has to be, because if there's anything imperfect in it's not God's word, and the problem is there are a lot of textual problems with the text, and we could be almost.
It was written by humans. People tend to forget that.
Yes.
It's divine inspired.
God breathed.
It's got hands to humans all over it, and we're prone to mistakes.
But also the scribes who translated it and who also, continued to write the copies of it. There are problems that occur.
They added their own theology and beliefs in as they went.
Yeah. And it's more than just, there are theological ramifications of that. But the point is that if you have this simplistic, hyper literalistic, everything the Bible says is literally true, and Jesus is going to come back at any moment. We're the last generation. And they've believed that for 150, 200, 1,000 years, right? And so many Christians lose their faith because they have a false understanding of the end times. They have poor understanding of the Bible as God's word. And so when they get good, intelligent, unbelieving arguments, it seems very persuasive because they don't have any answers, and they get sucked in. And that's one of the things I also want to address in this story as well, because it's also been a burden on my own life,
It's
just with other people around.
The building the house on the sand,
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. And I love how you capture that this is a serious issue, and life and death hang on it, because even metaphorically, allegorically, in the 30,000 foot view, it does. Because if you cannot defend your faith well, you don't know the word well, there could be somebody that's not a believer watching you and hearing your conversation with somebody else. And if you look like a fool and fall short and can't justify and explain the belief of your faith in your Savior, then you've ultimately put that person to death, because they're not going to seek redemption or Christ because you didn't do your due diligence and was able to defend your faith. So, life and death does depend on your ability to defend the faith.
Yeah. We need to take it much more seriously. And I'm happy to say that I think there has been I've seen a lot of Christians learn and grow in this area of apologetics and defending your faith. It's not like you have to become this, apologist, but just every normal Christian, like that Bible verse you said, even though there are some who are gifted for apologetics, some who are gifted for evangelism, that doesn't mean normal Christians shouldn't engage in apologetics or evangelism. It just means that some are better at it than others, and it's okay. You don't have to have all the answers, but if you care about the souls around you who are dying and going to be judged, then you would want find answers to their questions or their doubts, to be able to put them to rest, and at least for your own soul, but also be able to communicate to them why, in what way are they suppressing the truth and unrighteousness? Like the Bible says, in what way does the unbeliever know there's a God but suppresses him? Whether he wants to live his life for some sexual purposes or some other moral, money, or something he doesn't want to give up, some idol that he wants to live for, whatever it is, all unbelievers have something against God. That's what the Bible says, right? You're either for me or against me. And so we too often get sucked into this notion of, yeah, some people are neutral, and if I could just persuade them to believe in the Bible, then they'll believe in Christ. And it's like, no, that's not really how it works, because they're not going to believe in the Bible because they don't want to, because they hate God, and they don't want to be accountable to someone other than themselves. And that's really the heart and soul of unbelief, So anyway, yeah, I love the apologetics realm, but it can become a little bit too intellectual sometimes. And so that's why my approach has been to use narrative as my means of doing my apologetics. And that's what I hope Cruel Logic does. In a very real sense, Cruel Logic is explaining to the unbeliever that without God, they have no foundation for morality at all. And that means they know that their unbelief is wrong, because they know there is right and wrong. And they just don't want to admit that God is the foundation of that, and that ideas have consequences. These crazy, whacked out beliefs that godless, secular, humanistic people believe, they all have consequences. If you believe man is just an animal, morality is a construct, uses power to power over people, well, then it's no surprise people will act like animals and only care about power. And like, what are we seeing in today's world of two-tier justice, right? The people in power don't care about truth or justice. They claim the word justice, but they don't. They'll only apply the law to their political enemies, and then they won't apply the law to the people who agree with them. And so why? Because they believe in power. They don't believe in truth or justice. Truth and justice is just a cover word to make other people feel good about what they are doing, which is the pursuit of power. And yeah, so don't get me going down the road of our current fascist tyranny that we are under in America. But
yeah, no, I agree. I'm right there with you, Brian. It's just a sick, sad world, and it's never been perfect, you know what I mean? But what a world of difference one president and 3.5 short years can do.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to the novel, though. I just, like I said, it's my goal to I love theology, I love philosophy, but I know many people don't get into it that much. It's too intellectual, whatever. My goal is to make theology and philosophy entertaining, and to do so in a way that challenges people and goes beyond just a good story, but actually makes them think about things and makes them see things from a different perspective. And that's what I hope Cruel Logic does.
Well, Brian, thank you, man. Give everybody the information where they can find this amazing book and your content and the trailers too, because I actually want to check those out. I didn't know you had the trailers from when you were trying to make it into a movie.
Oh yeah. Go to my website, Godawa.com. It's an Easter egg. It's easy to find because it's called Cruel Logic, but it should be under my movies category or whatever. But it's a short that I did years ago. The killer doesn't look the same as the killer in the ad, okay? But the killer in the ad is more how I think of him now, right? But yeah, so my website is a very interesting website. I have all kinds of cool stuff, free stuff, information, lots of cool articles, scholarly articles about things that I write about. But all my books are exclusively at Amazon in both Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook, and now large print. I now have most of my books in large print as well for people. So, but it's all exclusively there at Amazon. Check it out. If you can just go straight to Amazon and type in my name, and you'll get everything you need to learn about the books before you buy it.
Awesome. Well, guys, If you got anything from it, hey, your study's important, your theology is important. Have a reason to justify the faith that you have. Until next time, torches high. What's going on, guys? Thanks for listening to the Prometheus Lens podcast. I asked if you've got anything out of this show so far and you're already subscribed, please share us with a friend. Give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That helps us to grow the show, get to new listeners, but it also helps us get better guests. Because a lot of times I send out emails to people and they check us out. And if we don't have a lot of good ratings and things like that, they won't even bother emailing me back. So anything you guys can do to help, I appreciate it. And if you're not a member of our members only group, I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of extra content on there. You get early access to episodes, private chats, members only videos and episodes. It's a great community. Join the band of brothers on this hero's journey.